if I were to pick a place to live objectively, I don't think I would choose Boston, right? I really don't. In terms of the things that I would want to have that make me happy. But the thing that makes me want to come here and stay here and build a life here and build a family here is the people and the relationships that I've made here. And a lot of those relationships I made here. A lot of those friendships I made here. And I there was an opportunity for me to stay in DC. And I have to say, one of the things that I could not get over, for those of you who have been in this position where you have an opportunity to go somewhere else, there's just nothing like Longwood.
Here, right.
There's just nothing like Longwood. And so I don't normally give talks like this. And quite frankly, I'm a little nervous because this is a very personal talk that I'm going to give. But I also feel like I'm giving a talk to family members here, you know, and I want you to take this talk as an invitation. I'm going to go first, and I'm going to tell you my story, okay, with regard to tennis and why I do what I do. And the invitation is for you to, at some point over the course of the spring or the summer or over the course of the next many years that we're members here together, I would like to hear your story, okay? Why you started playing tennis, what it is that motivates you to do the work that you do, the why that drives you. So again, this is the first feed over to your side of the court, and what I expect is for you to hit the ball back. So this talk is called From Love to Life, What I Owe to the Game of Tennis. I don't know if anyone's capturing the love there. Is that okay? It's all right? Okay. All right. So I want to start the conversation with my parents, because that's where my story starts. On the left side of the screen is my mom, and that's me. I have like slightly more hair in that picture there than I do now. And my mom is a superhero to me, okay? My mom was a UN gender rights consultant. She traveled all across Western Africa, going from village to village in Africa, helping women start shops, sell goods, have means of economic mobility that they didn't have. And this was her love, her life. This is the thing that really motivated her. My mom speaks 4 languages, and she's just a survivor. I remember my mom bringing him to the United Nations as a kid when I was growing up, and she would put me under her desk, and I would see her at work and just think like how beautiful it was that this woman was doing something that she loved and was good at it. On the right side of the screen is my dad. There's a question mark there because I didn't know much about my dad, and I didn't grow up with him. Shortly after that picture was taken, my dad left my family, my mom and I. And we lived in New York City together, in Queens, the 3 of us. And after my dad left, my mom had to make some tough decisions. She couldn't work at a job where she was traveling all across Western Africa and going and doing this and that. She had a kid at home, and she had to have a job that was stable and kept her around. And I was sick as a kid, and she needed health insurance for me. And so she left New York City with me. We moved to a place called Neptune, New Jersey, where in many ways, like this was like survival mode for my mom and I. You know, my mom left that job that she was good at, that she loved, that she was passionate about, and she took on another job, and that was teaching. She became a teacher, a biology teacher in Newark, New Jersey. My mom was a good teacher, but she didn't love teaching. That's not the thing that really moved her. And I think this is the first lesson that I had, and that is that, you know, I have been keenly aware from a young age of the sacrifices that people have been making for me. And I know what the costs are. And I know what I have to do to make the balance right in the end. But this was one of the first examples I saw of someone, you know, putting her dreams aside so that I could have my dream. And the story took a turn for the worst a couple of years into our time in Neptune. My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and I was 11 at the time when I heard about this. And as an 11-year-old, you don't know what cancer is. You have no idea. But for those who don't know, stage 4 is metastatic cancer. And, that didn't mean anything to me until one day I was in a room in our house, and my mom's boyfriend at the time was talking to somebody on the phone, and I heard him ask a question that really moved me and taught me the gravity of the situation. And I don't think he knew that I was listening. He asked, where does he go when his mom dies? And I think for me, that was the first wake-up call that life is unfair. And I think as I'm trying to depict on the side there, it's supposed to say in the abyss. It felt a lot like I was like sitting on the precipice of this like hole, like I was just this close from falling in and losing everything, because she's the only thing I had. And my mom wasn't very close with her family because of some things that happened politically. My mom was very active politically as a teenager. That ended up getting her blacklisted from the country that she was born in. She did her studies in Paris as a young girl and a teenager, but she was born in Haiti. And Papa Doc was the vicious dictator at the time. She was organizing against him. She ended up getting blacklisted, which broke relationships with our family. So she's on her own, meaning that if she goes, I'm on my own. And I understood then what was at stake. Over the course of the next 2.5 years, my mom got chemotherapy, radiation, double mastectomy, and the doctors were able to bring my mom back to me. And it was in this time where it felt to me like doctors are these superheroes. Like these people can help you go from that feeling of being on the abyss, like you're about to lose the last thing that you have that's important to you, and pull you back. And that to me was like one of the most beautiful things I'd ever experienced. I was like 12 and a half or 13 at the time. And it to me was this revelation. Like, man, if I could do anything with my life, it's gonna be this, right? This is the thing that I'm gonna do. And a seed was planted for me. This idea of becoming a doctor was this, ambitious is the wrong word. It like almost unrealistic is also not right. It was almost laughable. Growing up where I grew up, I didn't have people who were doctors in my family. I didn't know any doctors. There were no doctors in my community. It felt to me like while this experience that I had was moving, and while I wanted to be a doctor, on the right is sort of how I felt as a 13-year-old at the time. This feeling of this almost insurmountable challenge in front of me, right? We just don't become doctors, people like us in our community. And it wasn't anything anyone ever said directly to me or to my, friends, but it's just in the air. And I don't know if anyone can resonate with that, but when you sort of just feel like, this part of life you just don't have access to. And that's kind of what it felt like at the time. But luckily, as I told you, I've had people sacrificing for me from a young age. And this was a time where I had another person. I don't know if you guys can see in the back screen. All of these have pictures in the back. I've just done a bad job of the shading here. So I apologize for that. Can you actually, you can see a little bit, right? The outline, the silhouette of someone there. So that's actually my 8th grade math teacher, Mrs. Cullinane. This is a flattering photo of her. Mrs. Cullinane, man, she went on a limb for me. So I was in 8th grade, and this woman saw something in me as an 8th grader. she, and I don't know what it is, I don't know what it was, but she saw something and she gave me a job, my first job ever, in between my 8th grade and my 9th grade summer, where I was a court attendant, let's say. Like that's what's on the resume. In reality, I was a janitor uh, at a private tennis club that she taught at called the Ocean Grove Tennis Club. Jersey Shore, best beaches in the country. Okay, so she gave me this job where I'm sweeping clay courts with the lines and the brushes and kind of changing the garbage and all that. But what I would do, you guys, you know what I would do? I was so embarrassed because I was bad at it. So I would go in the morning before all of the members would come, okay, because I had a key. And I would go out there and I would, with the little, I don't know if you remember the picker upper that can also be a, okay. So go out there and just hit serves. All right, just hit serves by myself. Actually, I was just talking to Miss Cullinan about this. She told me actually she remembered. She was like, "Yeah, of course I remember that." She's like, "Alister, I remember one time I drove by and there was a big book next to you on the court while you were playing, and you were like going like this, trying to change the page. Apparently, I had found some book on how to hit serves in the library, and I was like, "Why don't you stop and teach me how to hit serves? I don't understand." Anyway, so yeah, I fell in love with tennis at the time. I got better and better, but I was like 8th grade, so I didn't actually have a long history of playing tennis, so I wasn't that good. I was number one tennis at Neptune High School, which is akin to saying I was the cleanest shirt in the dirty pile. There were like exactly 4 people on the tennis team, and so we had to go around and recruit all of the football players just to put their name on the thing, So we had enough people to have a core tennis team. But that was something that brought me peace and joy, and really was sort of core to me at the time. But then one night, my world shattered. I was 16 at the time. I was 1 month into my senior year at Neptune High School. And I went to my friend Jossie's house, my best friend. We were going to go to a high school party. If your kids tell you they're going out later on tonight, Friday night, don't tell them, don't let them go. Do not let them go. I showed up at Jossie's. He says, yeah, we got this guy named, we'll call him Jay. Jay's going to come with us to the party because he doesn't know how to get there. So Jay pulls up to Jossie's house and he says, yeah, I've never been to this part of town before, so I just would love to kind of follow you guys in the car and just kind of see where the party is, So say, okay, no problem. So it's a little weird, but okay. So we both drive our cars to the party, and it's myself, Jossie, who's driving, and Johnny, who's my other best friend in the passenger seat. Long story short, we get there, and all of the high school students, who are supposed to be the sort of focus of the party, are all on the porch, not saying anything, quiet. In the driveway, there are 13 to 14 grown men who are yelling and guffawing and laughing, and they're having a great time. But none of these high school students knows who these people are. So we get out of the car. My friend Jossie said, this is a bad situation. I don't know what's going on. We should leave. We get up about halfway up the lawn. We start turning back around. And what do you know? The gentleman who drove his car with us to the party because he couldn't find his way, instead of getting into his car, he gets into our car. And he jumps in the back seat. And I look at him and I say, Jay, what are you doing? You have your own car. Why are you here? He doesn't say anything. About 2 minutes later, tell your boy to step out of the car. And I look at Jay and I say, that guy, one of the men who was on the driveway, he's not talking to me, so you should get out of the car. Jay doesn't say anything. This man again says, tell your boy to step out of the car. Long story short, while that was happening, my other friend who had a chain on and was stuck trying to get into the car. One of the other grown men came over and popped his chain, which is sort of a disrespectful thing to do in any context, but definitely in this context. I got out of the car to try and save the day, and I didn't. Me getting out to try and defend my friend landed me in a world of trouble, a world of hurt. There were 12 of them and 3 of us. And by the time I woke up from the beating, I don't know if it was 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. By the time I woke up, I got back to the car and I saw my friend Johnny laying in a pool of his own blood. And my friend Jossie, who drove us there, through the windshield of his car. So I'm thinking it's time to go. What do you guys think? So I go back to the car. I see them coming back. So I see we have a small window. And I go to open the door, and the door is locked. So I look in the back seat. Who's there? Jay, the guy who came in his own car. He's sitting in the back seat by himself. And I say, oh, there must be confusion. Can you unlock the door? These guys are coming back. He looks at me and he says, I don't know what happened next because I didn't stay conscious long enough. I remember waking up in the hospital, my mom seeing me, and my friend Johnny and I don't look alike at all, but she couldn't tell the difference between us because of how badly our faces were beaten. Okay, it turns out that these men were after that guy in the back seat, and he wanted to look like he had protection and people with him, and he used us for that purpose. That hurt, obviously physically it hurt. They broke both my wrists, they broke my facial bone. I looked like I gotten dragged behind an 18-wheeler on my face. And but what really hurt was going back to school 2 weeks later with Cass and my face wrapped up like the mummy, and the school telling me, you can't come here anymore. We have a zero tolerance policy for gang activity. It turns out that those men were part of a gang, and they thought that because of that fight, I was also part of a gang as well. I absolutely wasn't. I had never done anything like that before, and my school didn't believe in nuance, nor did they care. And so, yes, I was hurt and my life was shattered, but emotionally, I think was the feeling of being really let down in that place was really, really tough to get through. So I had this, so my mom and I were trying to get me into schools. It didn't work. I ended up having to drop out of my high school in Neptune. And the most important thing I think I can share with you all is the feeling of rage that I had, right? This anger. And I had a choice to make, Do I give into that and try and get revenge? Or do I use this anger as an opportunity to turn that into something positive and try to make something happen? And I got to tell you, my first impulse was not the latter. Okay, I'm among friends and family here. My first impulse was revenge. And had I succeeded in that, I probably wouldn't be here today. Okay, it was by the sheer will of my mom. What happened next? My mom took a $30,000 Hail Mary loan out, okay? And she got me out of Dodge. She waited for my wrist to heal up just enough, and she sent me to a place called, well, actually first, does anybody know who that guy is? Anyone? Can someone say it out loud? There it is. Sent me to the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy, okay? As a senior. I didn't go to high school there because it was too expensive, but I spent every single hour of every single day playing tennis at Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy. Why? Because I saw if I could just do this thing really well, maybe actually I could change my situation. Maybe I can write the end of the story in a different way. I can't control what happened in the past, but maybe there's a way that I can write a better ending here. And eventually I got good enough to play in it's called the Scouts League, where basically there are people who come and scout the players in this part of the bracket. There was only one problem. The problem is I met my future assistant coach, Bob Stanicki, who was the head scout for Rutgers. I met him there at Florida in Bradenton. He said, "We'd love for you to play with us. You're a Jersey guy, best beaches in the entire country. And we would love for you to play." And I said, that's great. I'd love to play. There's a big problem. I didn't finish high school. It's the next person who sacrificed for me, okay? This man, again, with the shading, I'm sorry, but I hope you can see it. This man sacrificed for me, okay? That's Coach Bob Stanicki. He went out of his way to get me a GED so that I could play at Rutgers. So that, not even play, let's back up, so that I could go to college. All right, it's that level of investment that I've had, and I've been lucky to have all throughout my life, and without that, I wouldn't be here. Next, I was at Rutgers, and it felt a lot like a doorway had creaked open, right? This little kind of sliver in the doorway, and bam, right? Because I knew what the cost would be. I knew that I had this opportunity, and I had to make this count. And so I knew that I was going to medical school. That was not a question. I was going to do everything that I could. Why? Because you guys remember that seed, right? I now have an opportunity. So I knew I was going to medical school. And then something inexplicable happened. I knew I had a sister from my dad's side. She called me one day out of the blue, and she said, "Hey, our dad is going to be in New York City on a layover. Do you want to meet him?" It's a complicated question, isn't it? You know, the level of, I think, unresolved anger that I had at the time was like, I didn't even know how hungry I was, actually. But I said yes. We met at my college, and it was a little bit like this picture here, like two people who were like physically close, but not actually seeing eye to eye, you know? And I think that's partly because he wasn't ready to be vulnerable in the way he needed to be. And quite frankly, too, I wasn't really ready to be vulnerable either. I wasn't really ready to hear potentially what the answers were to the questions I've been asking myself for a long time. But what I did learn was that my dad went to Harvard. He was the ambassador to the United Nations for his country, Belize, which made it very complicated for me. Because, you know, some of my friends grew up without their dads, and their dads were not there because of alcoholism or because of run-ins with the police. And so I created this story of who my dad was and why he wasn't around. And this was not the story I was telling myself. I could maybe make some, I could have some sympathy for someone who has an addiction, who just can't get out of their own way. I could make some, have some sympathy for people who just, life didn't work out. But this generated a lot of conflict for me because he should have known better, is how I felt. But you know what I thought at the end of all that? At the end of our 4-hour conversation? Okay, you went to Harvard, huh? I'm gonna show you. And so I went to Harvard Medical School thinking that, look how irrational this is. How irrational. I went to Harvard Medical School, moved heaven and earth, did everything I needed to do. As if it would fill some hole, or as if it would validate or vindicate my mom, right? Have you ever been that irrational? I don't know, maybe it's just me. But I have been that irrational and more. Watch this. At Harvard Medical School, nothing changed, right? This feeling that I had didn't go away. So then you know what I did? I found out the school that he went to, the Harvard Kennedy School, and then I went there. So like super irrational. So I go to the Harvard Kennedy School, and it's as if I was gonna find him under the books or like in the desk or something, you know, like I think I was in search of him I was looking for him, but also wasn't ready to be open fully because I could have been hurt, you know. And then one day I got a message from someone else, from a sibling I didn't know I had. I told you about my sister. I didn't know I had this sibling. This is my half brother. He messaged me on Facebook and he said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, our dad is dying. He has metastatic cancer and he only has a couple weeks to live." He said, "I'm not going because of some stuff that happened between he and I, but I'm just letting you know I heard you're in medical school or something like that. And so I had a decision to make. Do I be there for this person who wasn't there for not just me, my mom and her cancer? Or do I say, I've got to be bigger than that and demonstrate to him the person that my mom raised? And so I went. I decided to go. Again, sorry, the shading. Just like picture me, but like 40 years older. We both have Harvard sweatshirts on because I brought him as his final gift, Harvard Kennedy School sweaters. And I spent the last weeks of his life with him. And it was the most important thing I think I've ever done. Got to learn about him, answer the questions that I've been asking, and also learn about the incredible work that he had been doing. In the meantime, I learned what my sacrifice was for. And this is a man who spent his whole entire life caring for poor people, caring for the least, the last, and the lost. And this is a picture from his funeral procession. He was given a state funeral, and these streets were flooded with people with no shoes, with no shirts, like rich people, poor people. It was clear to me that he had lived a life that was meaningful for someone, even though he wasn't there for me. I remember a conversation I had with his best friend, who was the chief of like the financial minister of the country. And he said that, Alister, take a look at the church. There's the first pews where the important people were supposed to sit, like the president of the country and all these other people were supposed to sit in that first row. And it was completely empty. But every other pew in the back was completely packed, as was all the sides, the rafters, and there were people on the like almost in the ceilings, filling outside of the church. And he said, you know why that first row isn't full? And I said, well, why is that? I said, isn't that for the important people? Like, where are they? And he said, your dad spent his whole entire life focused on those people. That's why those people up front, the important people, that's why they're not here, because they knew that. I find that ironic, right? Remember who matters most, Alice, is what he told me. The way that I think about that statement now, as I've grown older, is I've got to remember who matters most in the world and do the best I can, but I also have to remember who matters most in my family too. And part of my struggle is I've got to be a big enough person to be able to handle both. So that concludes the first part of this talk. I want to give people a chance to get some whiskey because we just got heavy. I have some here, so if anyone wants to share. I also learned that we have a drink called the Longwood. Has anybody heard of the Longwood? Okay. I don't know what's in it, but if we get the recipe, I'd be interested. So for me, the ER is really a place to devote my life to helping the last, the least, and the lost of those. And I do that in a couple of ways. The first is a physician. The second, though, is as a social entrepreneur. You might think, what the hell is a physician doing as a social entrepreneur? For me, it is a natural consequence of the work that I do in the ER. Why? Because if you spend even a day in the ER, you will realize how broken the system is. And if you are paying attention, you have two choices. You can complain about it for the rest of your life, or you can get in the ring and try to do something about it. And for me, getting in the ring and trying to do something about it, it looks like creating programs, helping to create policies, and trying to work upstream so we can fix the problems before they occur. And that's the work that I do. I want to tell you a couple stories from the people that I've taken care of. First of all, how are folks doing? Anyone need to go to the bathroom? We good? Okay. Those cookies are incredible, by the way. Some of them have raisins in them. They look like chocolate chip. Don't be fooled. So one day, I was taking care of patients in the Boston Children's Hospital. I was a third-year resident. This is about 7 years ago now. And it was a Friday night, 2 a.m. And I had this young woman come to the ER. She was maybe in her early 30s, and she had her 2 kids with her. And both the kids were younger than the age of 3. And she said to me, "Doc, look, I've had to escape an abusive situation with the father of my kids. And I moved here from another state. The only place that I had to live was with an aunt here in Boston. And so things have been going okay for the last couple of months, but the last couple of days, my aunt's mental health issues have gotten the best of her, and she kicked me and the kids out. And for the last 2 nights, I've been sleeping in my van with my kids. And tonight, we were going to sleep in the van again, but it's 2 degrees outside. And I turned around and I saw my 3-year-old shivering, and I could heard his teeth chattering. And I knew there's no way I was going to do that to him again. Can you help me? For the clinicians in the room, I know we have some clinicians, you know what this is like. When the patient asks something of you that you know the medical system cannot actually address, but you, of course, don't tell the patient that. What did I say? Of course, we're going to help you. Don't worry about it. I call the social worker because just like any other self-respecting ER physician, social workers bail me out every shift. Call the social. I said, we have this woman here. I'm not sending her to the